Hey guys, welcome back to my tutorial series on beginner scripting in Roblox, and today we're going to be covering functions and how you can use them, different things they do, what parameters are, things like that, and different ways to trigger functions. So setting up a function is almost like setting up a variable, but instead of saying local or something like that, you're going to say function, and then you're going to give it a name, and we'll say test, parentheses, enter. And so what we're going to do now is we'll say print test. And this line of code will execute when the function test is called on by the script. And there are different ways to call functions. First way, of course, is just to write test, and the script will run it automatically as soon as the server starts. But there are a bunch of other ways in the game, in Studio, to script to set up functions being triggered. There are like hundreds of ways. You can look them all up, but some popular ones are if a brick is touched, you would have like the brick name and you'd say dot touched connect, and then you would call a function, something like that. Or if a GUI object is pressed, you would say GUI object, whatever its name, dot mouse button one click connect, and then the name of your function, etc. There's a bunch of different ways, and we can go into that in later tutorials, but just know that there are a lot of different ways that you can specifically trigger a function to occur. Because the way this is set up right now, test is only going to run once when the game launches, when the server starts, and that's it. And there's no written code to ever make the function operate again. You have to manually put in the trigger for that function. So let's just see what happens when we run the server. We see that test has been written. Now, if you do this, you're going to get an error because the function needs to be initialized. It needs to be loaded in the script before you can call it. So always make sure that when you're setting up your functions, they're like variables. They're up here. And then when you want to actually call them, they need to come sequentially after the function has been created. Because like I said, you know, it's the same as setting up a variable like local x equals 5. If you tried to do print x plus x, the script's not going to know what x is. It doesn't know what x is. See? Same idea. It's like a variable, except it does something. So functions can do anything you can script. They're super handy for keeping your code concise. They allow you to run the same code multiple times through different triggers, like we were saying. So like, you know, touching a brick or touching a GUI object for a store, let's say there's like a sphere here or a circle on the ground, and you touch it and it makes a shop GUI pop up, or alternatively on your side of the screen you have a shop button and you press it. Same script, same function, two different triggers, so you don't have to type out all the things necessary for that GUI to pop up twice. You just write one function and you put the two different triggers down and have them call the function. So functions can also take something called parameters. So those are essentially variables that the function uses to execute its code. So we'll say local x equals 5, and we'll say x, okay, and we can say, in fact, we don't even need to do this, but I'll just do this real quick just so you can visualize the connect. These can be named two different things, by the way, and we'll get into that in a second. I just want to show you print x times x, run 25. So what happens is, and you need to make sure these line up correctly, and I'll show you what I mean in a second here, but x gets passed as a parameter here so that this function can use that value. I know that's a little hard to comprehend, but You really don't even need this at all. What you can do is 5. And 5 is going to correspond with x over here because it's the first variable given, and you could say 2, 3, and you can say yz. So x is 5, y is 2, z is 3. You just need to match up the value here with the variable you want it to be called here. All this is doing is setting up 3 local variables that are enclosed in this function and giving them the values passed when you call the function. So now, let's just do this, print x, print y, print z. Five, 2, 3. So it's very important that you line up the right value with the right variable that you want to use in your function, because these functions, or these variables I mean, only exist within this function and are only assigned the value you give it in the parameters when you call the function. So if you wanted 5 to be x, but you type them in the wrong order and you say 2, 3, 5, then x is going to be 2, y is going to be 3, and z is going to be 5, and that might not be what you wanted. So make sure it always lines up, and it can be variables that you've already written, like we showed earlier. 5, 2, 3, and you can pass x, y, z, but they don't have to be called the same thing, right? They can be called anything. They can be called A, B, C. And just make sure you pass A, B, C. And it'll be okay. So don't worry about matching variable names. Just make sure you know that the right value is getting passed to the right variable here. Okay, so let's test out one of the triggers I was talking about so you can kind of visualize what's going on when I say that. We're going to insert a part. We're going to, this is a plugin, don't worry about this if you don't have this. Just makes it a lot easier. It's Q command UTL to move objects by small increments and rotate them and resize them, etc. It's pretty handy. I use it for everything I build. So pick this up. We will anchor this so it doesn't fall down, and we will say local part equals game.workspace wait for child part, and we will say print touched, and then we will say part dot touched, and this is an event that happens. It's a property of part, or any part in the workspace, that when it's touched, it's going to connect, it's going to turn on, it's going to acknowledge it's been touched, and you'll say, you just use the name of the function. You don't have to put these. That's the Java thing I got it confused. You can just put the name of the function. You don't have to put these two unless you're going to pass a parameter, which we don't have any parameters, so don't worry about that right now. And I touched it, and I touched it, and I touched it a bunch. And so touch will fire a ton of times with one, what we would consider one touch, because obviously it's like a slideshow. I just touched it like 5 times as I'm falling, you know. So it's good to add something called a debounce, which we'll get into later tutorials. But so what happens when you touch a part? So what happens when you touch a part is a variable is automatically created, or a value I should say is automatically created, called I typically call it hit. It just tells you what has touched the object. So if you want to find out what has touched your object, I'll just call it hit. And since we kind of know it's a humanoid already, we already know it's a player, we kind of want to do this. Because if we do just hit.name, it's going to tell you the name of the body part that touched it, because the player is a collection of body parts in the hierarchy. So go back to server, touch, and yeah, player 1 touched it. So I'll show you what I mean by a player is a collection of body parts. See this? This is your player in the workspace, and all of these are body parts, so I might have just touched it with my head. And if we said hit.name, it would just print out head, but we want to know what player touched it, so we do this. And in order to, if you want to do an object that is only a person and isn't just a random like floor or other flying parts in your game or something like that, what you can do is an if statement. If hit dot parent dot humanoid, actually we're going to use something special, find first child humanoid, then print hit.parent.name. And to make sure that the hit has a parent, we can say if not hit.parent, then return end. So what that means, what I just did right here, don't freak out, I know it's a one-line if statement, it's kind of weird to look at, but what we're doing here is if there is not a parent of the object that has just touched this part, then return end. Oops. Then end this function, ignore everything else below it. But if the hit parent has a child humanoid, and it's not wait for child, because if there is no humanoid inside of the hit parent, then the script will run wait forever, and it will cause an error. So you do find first child, and essentially find first child is like a small if statement in itself. It's like saying, okay, if it has humanoid, look for it and find it, and if you find it, then do this, print hit.parent.name. So now the part can touch the floor, we can unanchor it, and it's not going to print out anything until a humanoid touches it. See, nothing's been printed, I touched it, and now it's touched. And now it's touched. And that's just one trigger you can do to trigger functions. Touched is super common, I use it all the time for obvious reasons, you know, like you touch a door, it unlocks, you touch a med pack and it heals you, things like that. So look on the look on the Roblox wiki, look at the API, and look at different triggers for functions you can use, and practice with these functions, do different things, practice with if statements, while loops, etc. Do it on your own. And once again, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, comment, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys next time.